Hello, everybody, and welcome to Random Number Generation. This is episode 9, Final Fantasy 1 Randomizer, and we are joined tonight by the lovely people that is Danny3883, Leggy Starscream, Sadi Wrath 11, Sho Fukumashi, and of course myself, your host, Skybilz. So, few announcements real quick before we dive into this. The first step will be Thursday at 7 p.m. It's going to be co-op Halo Reach, so you won't want to miss that. Frame Fatale is starting this upcoming weekend, February 23rd through the 29th. Very much looking forward to that as well. SGDQ game submissions opens up March 4th through the 14th. On-site volunteer applications also at the same time. Find out more about SGDQ and its dates on gamesdonequick.com. Also, Random Number Generation is brought to you by viewers like you. If you would like to support the stream, as well as the other lovely programs on GDQ Hotfix, please consider subbing to this channel. If you have Amazon Prime, remember you also have a Twitch Prime sub. If you have not used it yet, please consider using that if you have not already to support this program as well as the GDQ Hotfix. Without further ado, hello everyone. What's up?
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hey everyone.
How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Good.
All right.
Good.
So
Very,
we're going to
very
do
excited.
the countdown. We're going to get into the game a little bit and everything. But I know everyone is anxious and ready to go on this. Is everybody, are both runners ready? We
I
good?
am ready.
All right.
Yep, ready.
All right, that's ready by both of the runners. So here we go in 3, 2, 1, go. Good luck and have fun. So Final Fantasy 1. So what is the first thing someone who may have even never seen the vanilla version of this game should know? Obviously, it's the first Final Fantasy game, hence the 1. But what should someone know going into even the vanilla version of this game?
So this game is kind of unique among a lot of Final Fantasy games in that the very first thing you do before you even start playing the game is you make your party, and you have a number of classes that you can choose from. You can pick a fighter, a thief, a black belt, a red mage, a white mage, or a black mage. If you've played later Final Fantasies, you'll pretty much know what these different classes do, but I'll let Sonny get into the details of the roles each of these characters will be taking on.
Yeah, so as like you mentioned, there are 6 different classes, and each one has different roles that it fills. In the case of the fighter, it's a great damage dealer as well as very tanky. Gets very high HP growth, starts out with a good amount of strength, allowing it to deal a lot of damage very quickly, and overall, very, very strong, very tanky, good character to choose if you want something very balanced. The Thief is a character that doesn't start off quite as strong as the fighter, but can grow to be a little bit stronger than the fighter thanks to something we have implemented in the randomizer. And those are known as the Thief fixes. We'll get into those a little bit later, though. The Thieves, though, where they shine the most is in their ability to run away from encounters. They have a very high chance to run away from encounters. Now, your Black Belts, they are very, very heavy melee damage dealers and will mainly attack unarmed because their hit growth is based on certain level breakpoints being unarmed. And they can go all the way up to 10 hits. And that will cause a massive amount of damage to be done. The mages, you have the red mage who can use both white magic and black magic. The white mage who is solely locked to white magic or solely bound to white magic, and the black mage who's solely bound to black magic.
Yeah, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, black magic tends to be our offensive spells. So our runners picked up Lightning 3, which is a powerful offensive lightning elemental spell. I think we also saw Temper in the level 1 black magic slot. And then white magic is more your curative magic, your healing spells. Final Fantasy 1 also has AoE spells that only affect undead at white magic. And we see already a slight difference between our 2 runners in terms of their party. Danny preferring to take 2 red mages over Sho's red mage and a white mage.
And something to be noted with Lightning 3 is it is an AoE spell. So you'll have your base spells, which are Fire, Lightning, and Ice. Those are all single target. But Fire 2, Ice 2, Lightning 2, as well as Fire 3, Lit 3, Ice 3, those are all AoE spells. So they will hit the entire pack of enemies as you cast them. So they're very valuable spells to have early on in the game.
Yeah, so while we were giving that explanation of the different classes in this game, you'll notice our runners ran up to a dungeon to the north, beat up some random dude for no reason, got teleported back to the castle, and then got a loot and a piece of TNT. Here, this is the standard opening procedure you see in any run of the original Final Fantasy I. You go up, you defeat Garland, you rescue Princess Sarah, and bring her back to the starting Kingdom of Corneria. But in this, the key items that you get in this game, which are all pictured down on the trackers below, are shuffled among the various locations where those key items are normally obtained. But we can also have some of those key items out there just in any chest anywhere in the game that doesn't require, that item to eventually get to it. And on this particular flag set, we have 3 of our key items loose out there somewhere in random chests in the world that our runners will probably have to dig up in order to beat the game. There are some dud items out there that aren't required, but that are nice to have. And as both of our runners manage to find those, we will bring them up.
Now, Danny has made it over to the town of Provoca, which is the second town that we would access in the vanilla game, and there's a very, very important spell within the white magic shop known as Fade. Fade is the NES equivalent of the spell Holy, and in this case, Holy actually has a fixed damage range. It can deal anywhere from 80 to 390 damage to enemies that it hits, and it does hit groups of enemies. So it is an AoE similar to Lightning 3.
Yeah, in this game, all magic has fixed amount of damage it deals if it does deal damage. For instance, Nuke, or in later games, Flare, deals between 100 and 400 damage. It's always that base value to up to 4 times the amount. Which is nice from a predictability factor, because you always can rely on, okay, let's do that much damage. But conversely, a lot of later games have spells become more powerful based off of, say, the intelligence stat for several of the characters, and that is not featured at all in this game.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you get a spell and its damage range is going to stay static throughout the entire game. Now, the only time that the damage ranges will change is if an enemy is weak to the element being used, similar to what Danny just did against the Odd Eye and Sahagin pack with casting Lightning. That's going to increase the amount of damage that the spells can do. So let's see here. What else do we have that we could explain, Leggy?
So one of the things you'll be seeing these runners do is saving and resetting a fair bit as they go through. The nice thing about this game is it does use an encounter table, unlike some later Final Fantasies, including several of the remakes of this, where from initial power on of the game, you will take a fixed number of steps before you run into the first encounter. After that encounter is a fixed number of steps fixed number of steps until you run into the next encounter. And these encounters will always be the same as long as you're in the same area. And so by learning that pattern, because it's shuffled every time we roll a new random seed, you can basically use your overworld saving items, the tent, the cabin, and the house, to save one step before you get an encounter, reset the game, and reload it so that you never actually have to take any encounters you don't want to take.
And that can save a bunch of time. And for those of you that may not know what a seed is in a randomizer, think of it as an instance of randomizer. It's going to be the instance of the game that you're playing where everything is shuffled about. As you saw, the chests that are in the Dwarf Cave, which Danny is currently in, those two chests should hold something completely different in the vanilla game than what they do.
I think it's like 1,500 gold between them, if I remember my vanilla correctly.
I believe you're right. And since Danny talked to it twice, shoutouts to the Hooray Dwarf.
I was wondering what that meme was about. I kept seeing everyone saying hooray, and I wasn't sure what that was referring to.
Yeah, in the Dwarf Cave, there is a dwarf whose text box entirely just says hooray. That is Hooray Dwarf. Hooray Dwarf is one of the many friends we have in this game. Oh
my goodness! Okay, so
so
right
let's
there.
make sure so one of the things that's also going on in this game that we shuffle, we mentioned we shuffle around all of the chest items, we shuffle around key items. It is worth noting that we also shuffle around everything in all of the shops, but for enemies, we don't shuffle their statistics, we scale them randomly. I forget the exact scaling on this flag set, but you can set it to be anywhere from just pure vanilla to going up to 500%. Normally, those scalings go back down to 1 over that, so that would be 20 to 500%. But because we have some people who like having a fun time in this game, you can clamp it to always go up. But beyond the thing we do is we shuffle around enemy scripts and spells. So all of the special abilities that all of the various enemies you have in this game are shuffled around in a couple of different pools.
Now, the spell that you saw that obliterated Danny's party, Nuke, in the vanilla game, that's a level 8 black magic spell. And as mentioned earlier, it has a damage range of 100 to 400. And you may notice on Danny's side, well, the fighter's the only character that has over 100 HP. So even if it rolls at its bare minimum, that's still going to be very dicey for Danny. And there were multiple creeps in the encounter. So to give you an idea as to where that nuke comes from, if I remember my vanilla correctly, that is on the Evil Man mob. And due to randomizing where spells, abilities, enemy scripts land, it just happened that Nuke landed on these creeps.
And there's some talk in chat about, whether or not, not a vetted seed. No, it's actually pretty nice to see Nuke where it is, because those enemies only show up in the earlier areas of the game. So it is very unlikely that we will see Nuke again until we start getting into the boss refights that happen at the end of this game.
Or even from a little friend that we may see later on. But as for the whole enemy scaling stuff, in this flag set, we actually have the enemy scaled to be as low as 50%, to as high as 200% of their stats. So some of the enemies can be very, very squishy, others not so squishy, and they could hit like trucks.
Yeah, and it's important to note that just because one enemy has its HP going up by 150% doesn't mean that its attack is also going to go up by that much. All of the scaling that happens independently across all of the statistics that the enemies have.
And that's a big thing to keep in mind, especially when playing seeds like these, only because you may end up having something absolutely drastic happen early on in the seed just to continue playing, and then later on, everything for some reason could be just very, very easy.
Yeah, it's all up to the randomizer. Looking at the level 4 magic, we're not seeing too much exciting stuff on the black magic side, but that level 4 white magic shop has one of the, in my opinion, two most important spells in this game.
You wouldn't happen to be mentioning that beautiful, beautiful exit spell, would you?
I would be. So Exit and Warp are white magic and black magic spells, respectively. Exit, when you cast it, it takes you back to the overworld where you last entered. Warp just takes you back one floor in a dungeon. These spells are really useful if you need to go into a dungeon and try and dig out a key item, or just want to do an exploratory dive and get back out before the enemies decide to kick you in the butt.
Ooh, speaking of potentially being kicked in the butt, Show here has found a beautiful, beautiful trap tile. And if you've played the vanilla game, you may be going, wait, this is supposed to be the wizard trap tile. Well, we've shuffled trap tiles as well, and we've shuffled them in a way that they are called the B-side trap tiles. These trap tiles are going to be more difficult and yield more EXP, but in that difficulty increase and EXP yield increase, some of them may be very, very good to grind on to achieve higher levels relatively quickly.
Yeah, as it turns out, the way that the game is structured under the hood means that shuffling which encounters show up where is actually fairly easy from a programming point of view. So there are flags out there at this point to just make any encounter show up anywhere in the world, as well as one flag that's a particular favorite of mine to see inflicted on runners called Warmech Unleashed, which goes through every single location in the game and says, yeah, what if we allowed you to have a Warmech encounter here?
So someone had mentioned this in chat. Would y'all like to talk about the spring tournament?
Yes. So the spring tournament for the Final Fantasy I randomizer is currently accepting signups until March 15th. It's going to be a 5 or 6 if we get enough people signing up. Hint, hint. A week tournament where we will be featuring a bunch of flags for Swiss that are based off of this one, where each of the elemental dungeons is going to be incentivized, as well as this. We'll also be featuring a party draft for people who want it, so you can go through and build your favorite party, or not, depending on who you want to face up against. It's going to be a lot of fun, and hope that either everyone gets excited enough to learn this randomizer and show up, or at the very least comes out and watches.
Absolutely. And we also have exclamation point RNG that will give you a link. All right, sorry about that. So it will give you a link to the website and a link to the Discord. So if you would like to be more involved with the community, those resources are there. I blame my laundry going off at that.
Curse you, laundry. Oh wait, laundry's good though.
All right, so I had a couple of questions to start out. We always ask these questions on RNG. So what is randomized in this specifically? I know we touched on this in the beginning, but for someone who may not know the vanilla version of FF1 Randomizer, what are some things to kind of look out for? Of course, I would assume on a game of this scale, you would want to play the vanilla game to get vanilla knowledge. But after that, what kind of advice would you give someone? And what is the quick definition to what exactly is randomized in this game?
To answer the second question first, because, that's how order works, obviously, you can randomize almost anything in the game. You can randomize what classes you have available. You can randomize a lot of different things about the enemies. You can randomize not only the locations of all the items that you find in treasure chests, but also you can make those completely random. We randomize shops. We randomize so much. Heck, we've even started to develop procedurally generated dungeons, enemies, and spellbooks.
Yeah, and I mean, even in that, there's still so much more you can randomize. As you may have noticed in this seed, and if you've watched multiple seeds beforehand, the locations with which we obtain the key items are even randomized. So, I mean, in the case of the King of Canaria, he gave the loot, where he would normally give the bridge, so that way a runner of the vanilla game would be able to access Provoca. You can even randomize stuff like that. And another instance on that is the shop item that's normally available in the caravan that's near Onrak. That item is not going to be the bottle. It could be the tail. It could be the floater to give access to the airship. We've randomized what that key item will be as well.
And also which shop that key item appears in. And if you go to the randomizer website, you will see just like a massive amount of options that you can turn on and off. And beyond just the options we offer for randomization, we also have a whole bunch of interesting bug fixes and quality of life changes. For instance, there are a number of spells that in the vanilla version of the NES game are broken that did get fixed in a lot of the remakes. We've taken those fixes and incorporated them into the new version of the randomizer. We have quality of life changes, including, you see how fast everything's moving in this? If you've been watching Fred Coughlin or Ness Cardinality's work on the vanilla version of this game that they've been doing recently, you'll notice that we're moving a lot faster than they do, of how fast we're walking and also how fast the transitions between screens are. When we go into the item shops, there's an option to buy 10 potions or tents at a time.
Yeah, there are a lot of convenience fixes that we've added to the randomizer, just so that way, not only will it move a little bit faster, but it feels a lot faster to play than moving at the vanilla speeds.
Well, speaking of the dev team, would you all like to talk about the people who are responsible for this randomizer? Anyone who may have worked on it, provided ideas, etc.?
Yeah, so for that, if one of our runners walks over the the bridge either at the beginning or where the canal normally is, you'll get a full list of everyone. And I'm going to go try and find that list so I don't actually forget anyone.
I can name off 3 of them very quickly right now, and that's not including you, Leggy, since you have helped with development on this as well. Meridian BC, Introper, and Nits are 3 of the head developers that we have on the team right now.
Yeah. It is, of course, worth noting that FFR is an open source project. You can find it on GitHub, and a flag that you want to see in this game, we are more than happy to sit down and work with you and just like teach you some of the interesting things about both FF1 and the randomizer itself, to help. You know, if you're willing to put in the work, we want people coming out here and helping us make this to be the most awesome feature-rich randomizer we can. But yeah, to list off a couple of other people, you have Septimus, you have Artea, Cat Doctor, One Fine Day, Split Punched, and myself, who have also contributed code to this. Our tracker is made by Sealy Faye, who was floating around chat earlier. And there's just been such a culture of having people come in and contribute cool things to this game that has really shaped it and made it into the wonderful experience that it is.
Yeah, over the few years of this game being out, it went from being fairly basic to turning into this where you can customize just about anything you want. You'll even have some of us that are crazy enough to play with everything clamped at its max percentage and then have every single key item be loose within the world. And it's one way you could go about playing the game. It's not a way I'd recommend, though.
I mean, some people like that challenge, but for those of you who are listening to all this stuff and going, oh gosh, that is extremely intimidating, I wouldn't even know where to start. Trust me, I definitely understand. When I came to this the first time, I'm like, oh god, so many buttons. And since then, there have only been more. But if you join our Discord, we have what is known as the Duckling Program, where that's our term for new players in the community. We have a lot of sort of basic seeds to help you get your feet wet, as it were. Quack. With the randomizer and the different sorts of features that this game offers people.
And we're absolutely more than willing to help you get your feet wet, help you learn the randomizer, help you understand whatever questions you may have leading towards playing, even racing with some of us, because we hold so many races a day just to mess around and have fun with each other. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all working together to have the same goal in mind, and that's to help each other.
Yeah, and to play this game that we really, really all love.
So how did y'all first become involved in the community then?
Ooh, I have to think back a little bit on mine.
Yeah, I forget exactly when I stumbled upon FF1 as a randomizer. Must have just come up on speed gaming, because the first speedrun I ever did was the Game Boy Advance remake of this. And I forget exactly how I stumbled upon it, but I kind of just rolled into the Discord and saw that, it was an open source project. After a little bit, people were super nice, came in, welcomed me, helped me get started. And my very first project for this game was writing the code to do the procedurally generated waterfall cave.
All right. After thinking back a little bit, my first foray into the randomizer was I actually at first discovered the Final Fantasy PSP speedrun and picked up that, and then also was looking around at stuff on YouTube related to Final Fantasy, stumbled upon Final Fantasy Randomizer, watched the video, didn't join the Discord server. A little while later, I watched Dimrin run Final Fantasy Randomizer and picked up quite a bit of interest in it. And then another tournament started forming that I happened to join, and that really began my time Fantasy Randomizer.
So a little bit more about the lore of this as well. We saw the hooray earlier. What are some of the common memes for the game? Not necessarily even just vanilla, although I'm sure those are there. But were there any memes that have developed as a result of the randomizer?
The Batamant being the Radamant.
Oh boy. Sonny
That
knows exactly which one I immediately thought of.
Are you talking about the lobster one?
No. So,
Or is it Kraken 2?
So first of all, there's Kraken and Kraken 2 are two of the bosses in this who are known for very, very heavy physical attacks. So Kraken hugs are never fun for anyone. Of course, one of the things that happens in this community is because of the way that enemy scaling works, there can be a little bit of contention over which pieces of endgame equipment are the best. Some people have personal favorites, but the sword discourse is definitely a thing.
Go Team Vorpal. Case in point in that, by the way. But, I mean, if you look at your endgame swords, each one has its own specific use, and we'll get into those endgame swords as they show up.
Yeah. Additionally, there's everyone's favorite friend, Out of Bounds Bat. When our runners get into the waterfall cave, there is one bat that can be outside of the main bounds of the walls, just because of where. Also, the randomizer provides fun strats around using insta-death spells that comes up. Occasionally, we get things around just, oh god, the imps, those enemies we saw at the very beginning of the game, aren't safe.
You know, I had to say something about the Batamant or Radamant earlier.
Oh, hey, speaking of imps.
Hey, that's a lot of them. Oh, and that's a thing they've got.
Yeah, but while Danny is running around Waterfall Cave, as she gets to the very end to where the room where the robot is, keep your eyes open for Out of Bounds Bat.
We very well may see a good friend with Out of Bounds Bat showing up. And there it is!
Woo! Oh, and that's a grind tile.
That is a beautiful, beautiful encounter tile. So, if you have watched vanilla runs, you may recognize that as Yeah, due to the B-side encounter tiles, they come in packs.
Yeah, that encounter can't actually show up in vanilla anywhere, but it is programmed into the game in vanilla. So, you'll never run into it, but with the randomized encounters, there are actually a couple of encounters that don't actually show up in vanilla. And yeah, so I imagine Danny's going to sit here for a little bit.
While Show found the shop item in not the right shop. And it's kind of funny that the shop item was in this specific area.
Yeah, and getting to the race a little bit, what we've seen is a fairly common strategy from this flag set. Our runners went around that southern continent with the inland sea, trying to find their way out of it, either by finding the canoe and the floater, which would get them the airship, or by finding the canal, because they started with the ship and could use that to get out to the rest of the world. One of the things that the randomizer does do is add in some changes to the overworld map to make for some more interesting routing choices. The docks where they've parked their ships to get up here to the on-rack area and the waterfall cave are not there in vanilla at all. You normally need to have the airship in order to get to on-rack. But now, because of the way that the randomizer is built, you might be able to find the floater somewhere here in the waterfall cave.
And having those docks placed in these specific locations, in this case, there's one outside of Onrak, there's one outside of Mirage Tower, that is known as open progression. And you also may have noticed earlier on in the game that the runners were able to walk from Canaria to the Dwarf Cave. That is also part of the open progression itself.
Yes, there's a further extended open progression that adds that removes the rivers between Castle Ordeals and the Dwarf Cave, as well as puts a dock at the floater location.
The Ryukon Desert.
Yes, thank you.
So we have a couple of questions from the chat here. So why the party differences? What is the purpose?
So, going down the list of party members that everyone has, before we go into the one party member who is different. So we have a fighter. The fighter is the de facto physical character, wears strong armor, swings swords better than anyone. Almost every single player in this game says, yeah, fighters are pretty dang okay. You have the Black Mage because, especially with the randomized locations of the spells, Black Mage can have some serious offensive punch, especially against multiple enemies. So at the moment you have fighters mostly for dealing with single target in these parties, and you have your mages for dealing with, like, say, 3 eyes or 9 wolves or whatever.
Now, in the case of the red mages that are seen in both parties, the red mages are very versatile in the respect that they can learn both white and black magic. So they can have a lot of firepower, but at the same time, they can learn some of the restorative spells, even life magic potentially, if that is available to them. But there are some spell levels that they have spells that they cannot access, especially on the white magic front.
Yeah,
And
so as a rule of thumb, the red mage can learn all level 1 through level 4 black magic. So at those early levels, they're basically equivalent to a black mage. But there are a number of spells in those early levels that are locked specifically to white mages only. And there are some white magic spells that are very, very potent that if you don't want to run without, you just need to take a white mage for.
One of those spells being Cure 4, and Cure 4 is a beautiful spell that restores all HP outside of battle, but if cast inside of battle, restores HP and cures status ailments, excluding stone and death.
Yeah. Unfortunately, once someone goes down here in the NES version, they're down until the end of the battle. So, yeah, I think the red mage gets access to all but 6 of the first 16 white magic slots, and by promoting into the red wizard, gains an additional 2 of those.
Yes. Something I don't think we went over earlier is Castle Ordeals has a little bit of a change, as you may notice. Something else that gets randomized in this game is the pillar maze that's within Castle Ordeals. If you've played the vanilla game, then you've gone through this maze before, and you may be thinking, oh, this is going to be pretty straightforward. Well, that's not the case in the randomizer. It can teleport you to wherever it so feels, with some of the rooms with multiple teleporters. There's even one teleporter in the maze that teleports you back to the very first room of the teleporter maze.
That said, if you have the warp spell, you can use that. Technically, the way that the pillars work is they're under the hood, they're coded to work like staircases. And they move you from one location to the next. So if you have the warp spell and you go down the wrong teleporter, you can use that to go back and try a different one.
Unfortunately, there were no issues in the pillar maze, and things are good.
Yeah, so at this point, I think our runners are getting ready to start diving some more of the dungeons. Right now, we've seen them go into Marsh Cave, we've seen them go into Waterfall Cave. Right now, Danny is in Castle Ordeals. Show cleared that out earlier. So our runners currently have access to Volcano and the first half of Earth Cave. They have access to Ice Cave. And Show with the Oxyale has access to the Sea Shrine. And so now we're going to start seeing some of those routing differences, because our runners are still looking for what we call loose items, which are key items, or at the very least items that we have set out in what we call the incentive pool, that are not in the incentivized locations. Sonny, do you want to explain a little bit about what I mean by any of that?
With the incentivized item, we actually can control how many items you can get from doing specific quests or specific objectives. So in the case of this seed, the main NPCs and the fetch quest NPCs being the Dwarven Blacksmith, the TNT Turn-In, Teneric, the Elven Prince, the Dark Elf Astos, Matoya, and the Lefanish NPC. Those will have their rewards be randomized. You can potentially get one of the extra items that have been added into the incentive pool and not actually get a key item. But with the extra items being added into the pool and us having less locations than incentivized items, that shuffles 3 of the items into the world being placed in any given treasure chest.
Yup. And if you go to the randomizer website, one of the things you will be able to do is go through and check your pools of incentive locations and incentivized items, and it'll actually tell you how many items you have in the incentive pool versus how many locations you have, so you'll know whether or not you have loose items to worry about or duds.
Yeah, and you really don't want to run across a dud. Sometimes that just feels bad.
So another question that I like to ask every week on RNG is, what is the type of state or position in this game that you do not want to find yourself in? I know we saw the nuke attack at the beginning of the game, but what other things kind of make this randomizer difficult, or even extend the length of it in terms of what makes it more difficult and therefore takes a couple hours versus an hour and a half?
So, the most commonly thing you'll see across all flags, or at least all common flags, is that because we tend to play with spell and script shuffle on, you'll just occasionally run into seeds where particular enemies can have some really nasty combinations of things. There was one seed in particular where wizards, the enemy Sho just saw in the ice cave, had both Blizzard, which is a high-powered ice AoE attack, and Nuclear, which those of you who know the original game will recognize from Ormec. And that, combined with a lack of saving items for the overworld, turned what was normally like a 2-hour seed into a 4-hour slog.
I had a feeling you were going to bring up the nuclear winter, because that is one of the seeds that gave a lot of the experienced runners nightmares.
I also was the one who rolled that seed, so, gotta take my credit where I can.
Oh, absolutely. It was a beautiful, beautiful seed, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was kind of this maelstrom of perfect, just terribleness, because our runners had to go through 2 locations where wizards are fairly common in order to get the key items they needed to keep progressing. Luckily, on flag sets like this, that's going to be rare, and even that was just a 1 in a million opportunity of nonsense. More commonly, what we'll see being super trolly is the final dungeon. Sky, you used to play, or still do actually play, a lot of Zelda 1 Randomizer, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Tell me about level 9.
Well, level 9 can be as long as the rest of the seed. It is an unbelievable amount of rooms compared to any other dungeon in Zelda 1 Randomizer. And in terms of a race or tournament setting, we've been talking about the FF1 tournament, it can determine the outcome of a race single-handedly. So level 9, you don't underestimate it, and you might want to just keep track, especially during those tournament races, of where staircases are, because everything tends to blend together after a while.
Yeah, and in comparison here in Final Fantasy I, we have the Temple of Fiends Revisited, or Topher for short. It's the final dungeon of the game, and what it features is basically a refight with all of the 4 fiends of the elements. So you have Lich, Carrie, Kraken, and Tiamat out for revenge with upgraded stats and abilities, backed by the final fight against Chaos, and how their statistics roll and how their skills and spells go, you can run into some fights that will just stonewall you until you go grind up like 5 to 10 extra levels over what you would normally want to take down into that final dungeon.
Let me ask you a question in return then about this. Do people go into this section under-equipped? So, for example, in Zelda 1, sometimes we will go without any of the rings. Sometimes we will go in with wooden sword. Maybe only enter the dungeon with one key. Is there anything like that in this game?
Yeah, mostly it's going in without enough levels because of the way that the randomness works. Sometimes you'll just be like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've beaten, all of the first fiends with this gear, with this, with these levels. I'm feeling fine. And the game just looks at you and goes, no.
You mean like it's doing the show right now?
And there are deeply times where this game can just be kind of rude to you, and because because Topher is so long, and because some of those boss fights, if the enemy bosses decide to be on the tanky side, can take a while to get through. A wipe deep in the depths of Topher can be super costly.
And one thing to take into mind with a wipe deep into Topher is that Topher consists of a lot of floors. You start out on the first floor and you go up to the third floor to then go back down to the first floor in a different area of it to then go into the basement of Temple of Fiends, which will then lead you into the refights with the Fiends, and then you're on to Chaos. So it's a total of, if my math is correct, 11 floors of movement?
I think it's... Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, B1, B2, B3, B4. So it's 10, but luckily that bottom floor where Chaos is doesn't have any encounters. Yeah, and also speaking of things that will just wall our runners, one of the other things that can happen is if a runner forgets to check a chest that has a important key item, that can lead you on some grand circle tours of the world and just no progression, and I've seen a number of people get a little salty when they're like, oh my god, I missed the one chest I needed.
I don't know what you're talking about with that, Leggy. I've never been there.
I've never been there either. So clearly I'm just talking about secondhand knowledge and nothing neither of us have ever done.
Pretty much.
But the one final thing that can be kind of trolly in this game is that if our runners decide to, say, take 2 red mages over a white mage, and there is like some really, really potent white magic that red mage just doesn't have access to because of the way the randomizer goes, sometimes people do run into circumstances where they feel like they lost on the party selection screen. Which is unfortunate, but it's also part of the strategy of this, because you have these random spells, you have these random pieces of equipment you can find floating around that different classes can use to different degrees of effectiveness. And also, what boxes you open. If you only find one of the 3 ribbons in the game, and your opponent finds all 3, and there's some nasty AoE insta-death spell that their party survived just fine, and you had to truck through with a single light warrior afterwards. But such is the nature of randos.
So as we're getting into the mid game here, what are both of these runners attempting to do? Like, what is the objective in the middle? I know at the beginning, probably it's just to get a footing, find a few basic items. When you're reaching the middle, what do you think people are trying to do at this stage? just prepare for the final level?
So
at this stage, the number one thing that I'm thinking about when I'm playing a seed at about this stage is like, okay, where do I need to go to find all the key items I need to beat the game? How soon? What do I need to do to get my butt into go mode?
And to elaborate a bit on that go mode, in this case, there are only a few items left needed to really be in go mode. The chime and the cube have been obtained. The oxyale, which grants access to the sea shrine, has been obtained. So the only thing that's really left outside of the earth rod itself is the mystic key. And possibly even the floater. We're not sure on that just yet. So getting the mystic key in the earth rod would put these runners into go mode, and they would be able to clear all of the 4 Fiend dungeons and be able to access Temple of Fiends Revisited. But there are a few things that can be done that some of us may call conveniences, others necessities, such as class promotion, in order to be able to make Temple of Fiends a lot easier.
Yeah. So, did you also mention the Earth Rod in that?
I did.
Okay, cool. I thought I heard it, but I wasn't 100% sure. So yeah, right now, because our runners know that there are 3 loose items, they're just trying to open as many boxes as they can to find those 3 loose items so that they can stop opening all the random chests and try to sprint through as many of the Fiend dungeons where they go to light the orbs of the elements. They need to beat all 4 of the Fiends in order to get into Topher. And the more of those dungeons you can do without having to hunt down every single chest, the happier you are.
Well. That was a floater I just saw.
Interesting.
Now the question is going to be, what's the plan after this?
Yeah. So the floater has a couple of nice properties. One, it allows you to access the last few places you can get to in this game. The second is that the floater actually moves faster than either walking or your ship. So for those of you who are familiar with, say, Zelda 3 Randomizer, it's your boots. You want the boots as fast as you can because they let you move as fast as you can.
Yeah, and for those that like to have the values of movement, the ship and overworld movement both are at a speed value of 2, whereas the airship is at a speed value of 4.
Yep.
Now, if it were overworld movement without the boosted speed, that would actually be speed value 1.
Yeah. Which is one of the quality of life adjustments we make to the randomizer.
So we're about an hour in now, so this is a very common question among chat. How can you tell who is ahead or who is winning? Now we have the trackers here. What does all of this information mean? Obviously the runners are in our voice call, so we can't fully say what people have, but just in general, how would you go about answering?
You look at the left side of each player's tracker and you see a number of icons at the bottom which all represent various key items. Shoutouts again to Sealy Faye who designed this tracker. And above it you have the 4 crystals, or in this version, the 4 orbs. And our runners are going to need to get all 4 of those lit in order to get into the Temple of Fiends. So usually we do our scorecard by tracking how many of the crystals are lit. But as a proxy, you can pretty much say, okay, who's cleared out the most dungeons so far? And who's found the most loose items of the dungeons that our runners have kind of done out of order. But again, you never really know, because someone might take a bad wipe to an enemy that the other player thinks is completely safe. So it's really hard to say until runners start getting into that final dungeon who's actually ahead.
Yeah, having time variance in this really comes down to who enters Topher first versus who enters Topher second, so on and so forth. Without having any real idea as to what state the runners are in, it's a little hard to judge. I mean, in this case, we have one that's actually, they're both really close to go mode. One's just closer than the other. But even still, neither of them have completed any Fiend dungeons, so no orbs are lit just yet.
Yeah, and again, even if someone is ahead, there's still always the possibility, because of the way that the battle scripts work in this game, a runner can run into a encounter that the other runner thinks is completely free and safe because they got their lit 3 off before the enemies had a chance to attack, but the other runner got attacked first by the enemies and their party completely wiped.
Ooh, now that is a beautiful piece of equipment to actually say a few notes on. So, you may have noticed that the piece of equipment picked up is called the White Shirt. And this is a very special piece of equipment in the respect of it casts a spell called Invis 2. Invis 2 is an evasion buffing spell that raises the entire party's evasion by 40 within the battle and is stackable. So the party's evasion caps at 255. With 6 casts of it, it'll be 240. And due to their evasion based on their armor and whatever other gear they may be wearing, it very well may max out their evasion overall. But that White Shirt in and of itself is just an absolute free cast of Invis 2, which is extremely valuable.
Yeah, something we didn't touch upon that is actually kind of unique about the NES version of Final Fantasy I is that you'll notice when our runners go into their spell list, they have charges for each level rather than sort of the more traditional MP system that a lot of the later remakes of Final Fantasy I have. You only get so many level 1 spells, so many level 2 spells, so many level 3 spells before you have to go and either go to an inn or use a house on the overworld to refuel those spell slots. By having items that can cast spells in battle, you can do that without having to spend the slots that you might want to use for other spells as well.
Now, something you may have noticed is that a promotion was had, and now the Light Warriors are no longer their lesser counterparts. They're now knights, wizards, ninjas, etc. The nice thing about that is that the knight actually does get spell charges for levels 1 through 3 white magic. Their access to the magic itself is quite limited, but with some of the spells that are available, that's really, really nice. If there were a ninja in the party, a ninja would have access to level 1 through 4 black magic. And even that is extremely valuable to have.
Yeah, they both the knight and the ninja only get up to 4 charges of the spells that they have access to. But if you, for instance, manage to get, say, life 2 on your knight, that's 4 charges that you can use to bring your other life casters back if they wipe to something nasty in the Temple of Fiends.
It's something that's super nice to have.
All right, so another question from the chat here. Does TMPR, you'll have to tell me what that stands for, work in the rando, or does it do nothing? I'm very curious about that.
So there actually was a fix for temper in the randomizer, and it works properly again, as does the saber spell, SABR. Both of those work properly again due to fixes that were put into the rando itself.
Yeah, so what those spells do in the remakes and were intended to do in this version is give someone a physical attack boost. This attack boost does stack. So one of the things that you'll see a lot of runners do to overcome the low levels that they're doing some of these bosses at is just casting Temper and occasionally Saber if you find the Power Glove on their main physical attacker just a number of times to get that attack boost up.
And both of the runners do have that aforementioned Power Glove. So you will see uses of that throughout many different bosses.
Do we have time for a quick plug real quick for GDQ?
Go for it.
Absolutely.
All right, so folks, remember, Random Number Generation is brought to you by viewers like you. If you would like to support this program, as well as the other programs on GDQ Hotfix, please consider subbing to the channel. If you have Amazon Prime, you do have a Twitch Prime sub, so if you've not used that yet, please consider using that on this channel to help support all of the programming we do here on GDQ Hotfix. And with that as well, we haven't really quite asked about the runners. Now, I know all y'all, the runners are busy, but commentators as well, this is the time to plug yourself. So y'all do FF1 Randomizer, which is awesome. What are some of the other things you do on your channels? Do not be afraid to plug yourself, because this is as much about the community and the runners as is the race in the game. So feel free.
Danny, Show, do either of you want to go first?
They're focused.
Oh, sure. I mean, I guess we can do it. Yeah, I do. I just actually finished up with the Chrysalis Randomizer tournament, which is going on right now. They're in I believe the semifinals. So that was a lot of fun. I do a lot of this. The silly, really hard flags, like entrance and floor shuffle and clamp bosses and stuff that is not for the faint of heart. And I do a lot of casual gaming as well.
I'm a bit of the opposite. I don't play a whole lot of other games. I tend to, and when it comes to our races, I tend to track them more than play them. So, yeah, that's it. This FF bar is from about all I play, but I love it, and it's fun, and everybody should join and play too.
Yeah, Danny is our tracker extraordinaire in the community. We love her lots.
Couldn't have put it better myself, Leggy.
Thank you. I love you guys too.
Sonny, you want to go?
Sure. So I have a multitude of games that I play. I recently entered the Zelda 3 Randomizer League that my team just got accepted into. Outside of this and Zelda 3 Randomizer, I run Final Fantasy IV Free Enterprise, Vanilla Final Fantasy IV. I run the PSP version of Final Fantasy I, Kirby Superstar. Recently picked up Super Monkey Ball 2 again, and have been working on learning Super Mario All-Stars in 8% warpless.
Yo, I know that speedrun.
And for myself, I run this, obviously. I speedrun both the GBA and PSP remakes of this. In general, I describe my speedrunning brand as RPGs with too much RNG. So things like Final Fantasy Legend 2, Mystic Quest, the Pokemon trading card game. I'm taking part in a couple of ongoing marathons, including the Frame Fatales marathon that'll be channel next week. Additionally, I am a member of the Edge Case Collective, a group of queer streamers who are focused on both queerness as an identity and also an action that you can do in games. And yeah, I also occasionally write code for randomizers.
That's awesome. Which ones in particular, Lakey?
So as mentioned, I have contributed to this randomizer in particular. I also worked on a randomizer for the GBA remake of Final Fantasy I, which is called HMS Jane.
That sounds like a lot. How do you still find time to speedrun with all that? That's so cool.
So, I hear other people sleep. I don't know what that is.
She's not wrong.
So speedrun, develop randomizer, sleep, pick 2, right? Is that how that goes?
Also, somewhere in there you have to have a day job.
Somewhere in
I guess.
there. And also, folks, do not forget to follow all of the runners and commentators here. Everyone is fantastic so far. Everyone has contributed not only to this randomizer, but to the speedrunner and randomizer communities in general. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. This is really cool to watch.
Oh, yeah, and I guess the other final thing I should probably plug is that I'm going to be running the Pokemon Crystal Randomizer bingo at RPG Limit Break.
I guess I should probably make an RPG Limit Break plug as well, because I am going to be running this at RPG Limit Break alongside of 3 other very, very good runners, some of which you may know.
Yeah, that's going to be a fantastic show, and I can't wait to show this off to that community as well.
And for those watching on Twitch and or YouTube, when does RPG Limit Break start so people know where to find that?
That starts May 10th, I believe.
It goes on May 10th through May 16th.
The exact schedule to be announced.
We'll definitely keep an eye out for that, because people should definitely not only check the marathon out, but y'all running there as well. That's really exciting. So what is currently going on right now? Again, we're kind of reaching that mid to maybe early end, depending on, obviously I don't see too many crystals yet, but other than that, what's going on right now?
So I would call this close to the early stage of the end game. We've got Danny grinding, getting some levels to get ready for the real end game, and we've got Sho running into the best boss in the game, NA, Lich, who's really a pushover.
Yeah. In the vanilla versions of this game, Lich can be a bit of a problem, but in this, goes down in 1 hit.
Yeah, as you saw, 3 hits, 187, terminated. That's the end of Lich.
So Sho is our first runner to get on the scoreboard, as it were.
The Orb of Earth has been restored, and now It'll be on for the next orb.
Wait, we lit the Earth Orb first? Is that even randomized?
I mean, no.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, you'll notice that now Show is in Crescent Lake, where in vanilla you get the canoe, but one of the important things to note is that in the vanilla version of this game, the sages won't give you their item until you light the Orb of Earth. One of the things we did in this to allow for some cool updates in the way that you go about the progression of this game is we went through and we put in a flag called Early Sages, which basically means you don't have to beat Lich anymore. There's a couple of other early flags in there that just make the game flow a little more smoothly, may allow for slightly less linear progression through the space.
One of those was early Sarda. Oh, hey, that's a thing. One of them was early Sarda because normally in the vanilla game, you would actually have to defeat Vampire to talk to Sarda and get his item. And in vanilla, he's the NPC that carries the Earth Rod. Another one that was on was early Ordeals, and that allows access to Castle Ordeals without requiring the crown.
Yeah, and both of those, the early Sarda and the early Ordeals, require the item that they're locked by to even get there in the first place, which is kind of an interesting thing, and there's some speculation as to whether or not this was due to just programming oversight or due to like in previous iterations of the flow of the game allow you to do things more openly. It's an open question, but we kind of smooth that process over. You might be noting that, oh, okay, obviously you need the loot to get into the Temple of Fiends because those of you who are familiar with the vanilla game know that you need it to break the slab on the 3rd floor of the Temple of Fiends Revisited. But we're talking about how we also need the Mystic Key, and you might be thinking, well, doesn't that just open up, a couple of doors in, like, Corneria Castle and Dwarf Cave to get into those armories? But there's actually a door in the Temple of Fiends Revisited that in vanilla is locked by the Mystic Key. So if you don't have the key when you go into Topher, you just run into the door and can't get through.
You sit there looking at the door going, what's going on? What, huh?
So go ahead.
Oh no, sorry.
We had a question from the chat here. Are the bonus bosses in this randomizer?
They are not in this randomizer.
Yeah, so technically, yes, depending on what you mean by the bonus bosses. In the remakes of this game, there are additional dungeons added in that feature bosses from later Final Fantasy games. Those were not included in this initial version, mostly because those games didn't exist yet to reference. However, Warmech, the secret boss in this game that you can only find in the top of the floating fortress, is here, and there's a lot of things you can do if Warmech is a friend you like showing up.
And some of us affectionately refer to that top floor of the Flying Fortress as the Bridge of Destiny.
So, speaking, Sky mentioned memes earlier for this game. This also extends a little bit to the vanilla runs of this, but when we get up to the Bridge of Destiny, if Warmech is vanilla, one of the things we do is ask chat to get their Bless RNGs out.
And just so you all in chat have an idea, Warmech is actually set to vanilla, and we have 3 different things that we can set Warmech to. The first option is vanilla, which means it'll retain its normal encounter slot. The second option is patrolling, which means it will show up as an NPC in the 4th floor of Flying Fortress. And the third setting, and my absolute favorite setting personally, is Unleashed. Warmech can be anywhere in the world. Replaces 1 encounter, and if you get that 1 encounter anywhere in the world, you're going to get a Warmech.
Yep. And
Oh, here's one. Agama Facts.
yeah, shoutouts to the vanilla NES speedrun. Well, the old vanilla NES speedrun, where the Agama was the most common grind spot for this game.
Good old Agama Facts. So, both of our runners have entered Go mode, and now it's just going to be cleaning up the rest of the Fiends and going into the Temple of Fiends Revisited to take down the big bad Chaos himself.
Yup. Runners have an orb each, so
All right, I'm gonna
both looking pretty good. Sorry.
I'm gonna try to relay this the best I can. This is a question for Sonny. When shuffled encounter table is on, does Warmech, I hope I'm reading that right, Warmech Unsealed still only appear in encounter 7? Can't remember.
Warmech will not appear in solely encounter 7. Warmech can appear in encounter 3, encounter 2. It just picks one of the random encounter slots, and that's the encounter slot that Warmech will be in.
Warmech Unleashed, make sure you really, really love Warmech.
Who doesn't love a good, friendly Warmech?
Beep boop.
So without complications, y'all said they're both in Go mode. How long does it take from approximately where they both are to Go mode? It looks very similar right now based on the trackers, but maybe that's deceiving.
Yeah, so they both have all of the items they need to complete the game. And now it's just a matter of going through the final dungeons, knocking them out, and lighting all of their remaining orbs. So, I'd say it's probably a 15-20 minutes to get both of them into the final dungeon tops.
And with Show having 2 orbs lit, as it is, it might be a little less time for Show getting into Temple of Fiends Revisited.
Now, is that the same now, the temple? We were talking about the similarities between that and Zelda 1 Randomizers level 9. Is that still anybody's game?
Oh yeah.
Very much so, because of what we like to call the Gatekeeper. And the Gatekeeper can be any one of the bosses in Temple of Fiends Revisited. You could run into a Carry 2 that has an absolutely awful spell and ability list and has no chance of a melee attack, will always use spells and abilities, and just wipes your party instantly. You could run into a Kraken 2 who laser focuses at your back line of casters, knocks them out, and then just leaves you left with nothing to do.
Chaos can have Stone Touch, which there are 2 enemies in the game where their physical attacks can inflict statuses that just take a light warrior out of the fight by either turning them to stone or just straight up killing them.
One of those enemies in the vanilla game is the sorcerer, and the other enemy is the Costatrice.
Yeah, and of course, luckily that stone touch is protected. You are protected from that stone touch by the ribbon. However, death touch is technically non-elemental, so even your ribbons won't save you in that case. The only way to get resistance from that is to just grind more levels.
And that actually brings up something I don't think we mentioned about the ribbons, is that ribbons actually resist all elements. And the only things that will deal full damage are non-elemental abilities. So, Nuke being non-elemental, as well as Nuclear being non-elemental, Swirl and Tornado.
Yeah, and all of these are very high potency abilities and spells as well. So, because in general, our light warriors don't actually get that much magic resistance. Those can prove troublesome. A bad nuke can wipe almost any party member we see on screen right now. The fighters are probably going to be okay, but everyone else, it can roll up to 400 damage. And there's just nothing you can do about it outside of grinding. Nuclear can do up to 320 damage. And if your light warriors don't have ribbons or other items that resist magic, there are a number of nasty insta-death spells that can just be floating around.
And some of those instant death spells, actually, all of them, are Bane, Crack, Quake, Toxic, Glare and Glance. List gets too long. But the biggest one to watch out for out of all of them is Zap. Zap is a, correct me if I'm wrong here, like a time elemental spell.
You are
that
correct.
will exile whatever target it lands on to the 4th dimension, instantly killing them.
Yeah, and the only ways to resist time elemental magic are being Chaos. Chaos is the only enemy in the game that resists time element. Wearing a ribbon or wearing the black robes.
Because the black robes have the property to resist time magic.
So another question here. Is there an option to randomize which fiend is in which dungeon?
Yes. I actually wrote the code to put that flag in there personally.
That was a question I was going to let you answer, Leggy, because that is your baby.
Yeah. All it does is changes which fight happens at the various orbs, and it does it completely randomly, so 1 in 24 times it's just going to look completely vanilla, but yes, that is one of the flags we have.
And it is very, very possible to just walk into Earth Cave, be low level, and then suddenly, oh hey, it's Kraken! What do I do?
Yeah. So speaking of instant spells, Danny queued up the Quake spell against Lich. Unfortunately didn't get a chance to throw it out there. But fun fact, Lich is in fact not resistant to Quake, despite being the Fiend of the Earth.
Lich did not get to eat its cake. That's about all I got on that one.
I mean, I liked it.
And while we're on the topic of instant killing fiends, the other big spell to watch out for from our runners as they go up against the first fight against Tiamat and Kraken is the Brack spell, which has a about 1 in 4 chance to instantly kill Kraken 1 or Tiamat 1.
Another spell that can instantly kill them from full health is Bane, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if either of the runners have Bane.
Bane, unfortunately, is also a little less reliable.
That is true, too. But we have our first runner slowly approaching the Bridge of Destiny. So, as they approach the Bridge of Destiny, be sure to get your Bless RNGs out in chat because we want to see a War Mech.
And here we go.
On to the Bridge of Destiny.
First fight is a Nacho.
It's a delicious fight.
A nacho?
It's a Na Ocho, but we shorten it to Nacho.
And one of the actual flags that you can set in this game, it's a fun flag. It doesn't actually affect anything under the hood. Is you can give enemies some fun names, and you can also randomize their color palettes.
No War Mech.
Ooh, slimes.
Ooh, slimes. That's a good encounter.
No robot for show.
Unfortunately, no robot this time around.
It's okay. We've still got one more chance when Danny gets up to the Bridge of Destiny. So, fingers crossed.
We can hope. We can pray to RNG to give us that glorious, glorious War Mech. Also, it looks like Tia's packing quite a bit of power this time around.
Yeah, Sho is throwing out the lock spell, which reduces the evasion that Tiamat has, meaning that our fighter is more likely to land each of its hits. Normally, that spell is kind of rough to use because it has fairly low accuracy, but because of the way that we randomize stats, high evasion bosses became enough of a threat that we decided to go in and make it always hit as a flag you can turn on.
Now, I can't help but also point out the weapon that the knight was swinging. That was the Vorpal Sword. And the Vorpal Sword is a very, very high critical hit rate sword that, when tempered, can put out a lot of damage in very little time.
Yeah, there's a reason a number of our community members swear by the sword. That one in particular.
As well as the katana, which is the ninja's equivalent of the Vorpal. Both of which are very high crit rate swords. Yeah, slightly better, definitely. But they're both very high crit rate swords, and when fasted and tempered, the damage output from them just grows exponentially.
Yeah, the other big weapon that you'll see people talking about is the Mosmoon, which has the highest damage and hit chance for any of any weapon in the game. Anyone at all can equip it. And personally, I find it to be the best tool for most of the jobs. The Vorpal is really nice for getting through bosses that have a lot of super tough defense because of the way that Final Fantasy I calculates critical hits.
Yeah, and the way that that happens is the enemy's absorb or defense is not even taken into calculation with critical hits. It's going to deal the full damage of the swing itself. But we have both runners now in Sea Shrine. Sho with the 1 orb lead. Danny about to pull Kraken 1. Are we going to see some Brack strats coming up.
Yeah, let's bracken the Kraken.
Here we go.
First one misses.
But Temper's going out onto that knight, so that knight's going to be doing quite a bit of damage. And the white shirt coming out, raising evasion. Very nice to have against Kraken 2, or Kraken 1, I'm sorry. Kraken 2 isn't quite yet. But ink coming out, that's not going to do much of anything. All it would do is just inflict the darkness status. The second Brack misses entirely. I'm going to continue using those beautiful, beautiful Brack strats.
And you'll notice the white shirt being put to exceptional use here, as Kraken gets broken into pieces.
There it is! And that's how you take down Kraken in style.
Also, chat is making fun of me for my pronunciation of the Masamune, but, like, come on, it's the NES version.
Yeah. There was a question, by the way. Could y'all randomize one of the remakes? Is that a thing, or is the programming and the code a little more complicated behind a remake?
So, I know the answer to that, because I worked on a randomizer for the Game Boy Advance version of this game. And yes, the GBA version and later versions are vastly different under the hood, to the point where it would not make sense to just port this game over. However, if you're interested in that, the HMS Jane is a randomizer for the version of this, loosely free enterprise-ish.
It's a lot of fun. I've played it a few times and really enjoyed it. There also is a randomizer for the PSP version, but it's not as well refined as this version. And it's also not as well refined as HMS Jane is. But we have our first runner with all 4 orbs lit. That is Sho Fukumachi, going to be heading towards the Temple of Fiends Revisited. We're going to find out how much of a gatekeeper we very well may have.
Yeah, so at this point, Sho has all 4 orbs lit, as well as the loot and the mystical key, so he's in go mode. There are variations that you can do for this randomizer. For instance, there is Shard Hunt, which is loosely inspired by A Link to the Past's Triforce Hunt, where instead of lighting the orbs, you find shards, which have a fun randomized name every seed, in the treasure chests out there in the world. And when you get enough of those, you gain access to the Temple of Fiends. Additionally, there are options for shortening the length of the Temple of Fiends as a dungeon. And with those, you can still put in the Fiend refights, or not, but it does save you the trouble of needing to find the Mystic Key. Additionally, you can start with the loot just in your inventory and remove the Mystic Key door from the Temple of Fiends. I forget whether or not we've changed that flag name from Chaos Rush or not.
That is just Shortened Topher.
Okay, yeah, no, Shortened Topher is only the Chaos floor of the dungeon. There's the other one that starts you with the loot.
Oh, that one is Chaos Rush.
Yeah. And additionally, there is a flag where you just start with all 4 orbs lit, and you just need to go around and find the key items you need to get into the Temple of Fiends. And the levels.
Aptly named free orbs. Alright, Sho has made it back to the first floor of Temple of Fiends Revisited and is soon to be entering the Earth floor or Lich's floor, and will be in that refight before too terribly long.
Well,
Now-
Danny is rapidly making her way up Mirage Tower into the floating fortress.
Now, as mentioned earlier, there actually is a chance to have a very nasty gatekeeper here in Temple of Fiends Revisited. And more often than not, the gatekeeper will be one of the last 3 bosses in Temple of Fiends itself. And it will either, those last 3 bosses will either be Kraken, Tiamat, or Chaos himself. But Lich 2 is pulled, going with a Vorpal swing, 3 hits, 194. There is Nuclear coming out, dealing its massive amount of damage. Fire 3 coming out, 114, plus the 184 from Vorpal. Lich 2 had under 300 health, Leggy. What? Lich 2. Just absolutely disrespected with under 300 health. Come on, Lich 2.
I mean, that's how Lich goes in general, because of the way that the script shuffle works. Lich doesn't always get that beautiful opening salvo that in the vanilla version.
And I mean, with the scripts being shuffled, Lich 2 doesn't have nuke anymore. But we could see a bunch of nukes on these later bosses, because if I'm not mistaken, we haven't seen a boss with nuke yet. And that's actually kind of scary to think about.
Well, we've only seen one of the bosses in that have these late game scripts. So all of the Final 4 refights, Chaos and Warmech, have their spells and abilities only shuffled amongst themselves to make sure that they're properly terrifying. Also, Bless RNG's back in chat.
Absolutely. Bless RNG. Let's see a Warmech. Couple of fighters. That's a good start. Oh man, this carry too is gonna be a thing. I like it.
Yeah.
So far, no mech, but if this were a vanilla encounter, or if this were an encounter in vanilla, this would be terrifying.
Yes, in vanilla, sorcerers are the ones with the death touch that was mentioned. They also have trance, which is an AoE stun. Stun is the single most obnoxious status effect in any video game I've ever played. I'm just going to throw that out there.
I have to agree with that motion. That Sun Sword is putting in some work. And unfortunately, there's no Warmech this time around.
So in terms of seedling so far, is this kind of a little slower than usual in terms of, like, you know, difficulty and whatnot? Because I think a typical FF1 is around 130, if I'm remembering right.
It can be. The night, again, we have a lot of flags that we can turn on and on, all of which radically change the flow. I think this one was a little bit slower. I think our loose items were a little on the trolley side, but in general, our runners are handling themselves expertly.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. The loose items definitely were on the more trolley side for this seed, but with how both of these runners have been performing, they've done extremely extremely well, handling everything that the seed's thrown their way.
That always tends to happen lately with random number generation is that, I ask people, did you test the seeds? They're like, yeah, but then all of a sudden they're like these trolley seeds, and it's like, okay, I guess that's cool to show off. It shows how talented the runners are, of course, so that's cool.
Yeah, and the other thing about seed vetting in general is if I go through and I look through the seed, the first thing I'm checking for seed vetting in FFR is how trolly Topher is. And because there are some fights in here that I will just not show in a marathon or showcase setting. Loose items can be a little rough, but the problem is because of the nature of this game, depending on what routes our runners take through the game, what is appearing to be a completely free item could just be a complete troll to someone else because of the order in which they go through and clear dungeons.
Yeah, and I mean, all in all, that falls back to routing in and of itself, just because things can go completely awry based on routing. But we see Kraken 2 pulled. Leggy, is this going to be a gatekeeper?
Well, I mean, if our runners weren't here, I do have my notes from my run-through of this out. So I could give a little more information, but, it's always nice to have a little bit of a surprise. But with that hit for 700 from show, I'm not too worried about it.
Nah, I'm not either. I mean, seeing that come out, there's not much to be worried about. He's still fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's deep enough into the script. Show had to go through 2 inks to get to the nastiness. And an experienced runner at that point has all their buffs up on their party that getting through isn't that big of a deal.
Absolutely. And now only 2 bosses remain for show, where Danny has entered Temple of Fiends Revisited. So there really isn't too much longer left on this, unless, well, okay.
Did you just commentator's curse?
It'll be fine.
I saw that, Sonny.
We're giving Danny a chance to catch up.
You can ask Leggy this. It's one of my fortes.
I got my eye on you.
Don't worry, I won't make it go overestimate. I'm not that evil.
That looked brutal, though.
It was. Seeing that come out first is just, it makes me shudder.
Someone just said, Sonny, do it again. I wasn't looking.
I can't make any promises.
That's harsh.
I mean, I can try, but I can't make any promises that it'll work. So, Sho has made it through the 4 refights of the Fiends and is now on his way to confront the true evil overlord of this game, Chaos himself.
And Danny is all the way down on the earth floor of the Temple of Fiends, making quick work through the dungeon. This is going to be a fairly close one.
Now, something to keep in mind with Chaos is in the vanilla game, Chaos has 2,000 health, has the chance to cast Cure 4 to reset your damage done, all of that good stuff. In this case, we don't know what Chaos really has. So we may see some more nastiness come from Chaos for all we know. We could see a Chaos that takes literally no time.
When is time called on the race?
When
Last
the
hit on
text terminated.
Chaos.
Okay.
Yeah, so there will be a text box that says terminated. Chaos will start to do that beautiful retro game crossfade defeat.
Ooh, 4 hits for 412. That's a good start. But Chaos having that laser targeting does what he does best. Or should I say does what Kraken does best. Oh,
All right.
And there's the exponential damage gain that I mentioned earlier with Temper on the Vorpal Sword itself.
Yeah, Chaos sending out Stop, which is completely resisted by the ribbons we found.
And that is time for show.
GG.
GG's show. That was a beautiful final hit on Chaos.
Phew.
That is a 149.13. Get your GGs for show, folks.
Thank you very much. Wow, that thing with that spell or something on that one guy.
You mean the one that I may have cursed?
But did you guys see the one on the carry 2?
I think I
Yes.
Okay. that was painful.
Well, if I missed it, I might be able to see Danny get hit by it.
Ooh, I like the stats here at the end. This is really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's really cool. You can see all the stuff and how many times you got away, how many times you wiped.
How many steps you took in the seed. How many chests you opened.
Yeah, that number of chests open is definitely one of the numbers that several of our community members try to optimize when they play.
All right. Carry 2, not packing much heat on the punches, even though she is the Fiend of Fire.
Oh, wow, she leveled a lot.
She definitely did. 2 hits, 34 damage onto the red wizard Zoe. Not doing much damage overall, but there's a spell coming out. Good old Lit 2, but 4 hits for 853. Carry 2 will go down for Danny, and Danny's going to be moving on to Kraken's floor.
Nice usage of the Sun Sword.
That Sun Sword did some work.
This would have been a very appropriate seed for a black belt.
Yeah, I could see the argument for that. To get a little bit into the black belt, because we didn't dive too deep into black belt strategies. Black belt in this game is built upon levels are king. So as our runners go through the game, the black belt's going to start off really weak, not really pulling anything resembling his own weight. But if you can grind that black belt up to level 32 or higher, who here is familiar with the anime One Punch Man?
That literally what black belt becomes at 42.
Yeah, so at 32, the amount of hits a black belt gets becomes 8 hits. And at 42, you get 2 more hits. So it goes to 10 hits. And the critical hit chance calculation for black belts is, it's a beautiful thing.
And on these flags, the crit rate for black belt is actually halved. So you can do and uncheck that flag for vanilla black belt crit, and like at 42 you'll see the black belt hit for 2,000 damage even on fiends,
Just very easily.
It's beautiful to watch.
And for racing, sometimes even though it takes quite a bit of time to or can take a lot of time to get to 42. With the grind tile in the waterfall cave, it would be really quick, and the time you would generally lose because you're grinding, you could easily make up in Topher with just one-shotting fiends and stuff like that.
Yeah, because as you can see, each of these fights, our runners are like carefully deciding what spells and attacks to do to get through each of these fiends without getting their face hugged by Kraken. Whereas a black belt, you just roll up, black belt punches, next fight.
So you may notice Danny queued up the spell Brack against Kraken 2. Well, this actually has a chance of working, but it's a very small chance. It's about a 6% chance, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And you will also notice that Kraken cast Cure 4. Cure 4, as some people in chat who aren't familiar with, is a spell that heals your HP back to full. Normally Chaos has it, but any one of these fiends can have it, and it's always super rough to see it, like, when you're about 3/4 of the way through a fight, you're just slogging down the enemy's health, and then they just undo all that work.
Are we going to see the thing again? Ooh, that's actually a thing that I wasn't expecting. Hi, Inferno. How are you doing tonight?
Ooh.
Oh, there's the thing. That's scary. Okay.
Danny
And-
got this. She
Oh,
had the
no!
heal 3 ready.
Oh, I'm so
Oh
glad I
my
didn't see that.
Goodness. But even still, Leggy, Inferno into Nuke.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Gotta be feeling that one.
But
And then a punch that misses. 2 hits for 245.
But Danny definitely has the levels to take that, which is good.
Oh, very much so.
Woof.
And I think that's probably the most scary of the stuff out of the way right now.
So definitely, and if fights take a while, it will cycle through, and there is a possibility of seeing that again.
Yeah. All enemies have up to 8 different spells on their list. I mean, it could be the same spell multiple times. And up to 4 abilities. And so if you let the fight go on long enough, it will loop back around. So if Tiamat had been allowed to sit there, that nuke could have come back.
Yeah, it would have come back with a vengeance, and that vengeance would have been quite painful, considering where Danny's health was at. But we're gonna have Danny moving on to the Chaos fight after this, I'll say beautiful vampire pack, but in reality, no. Just no.
Well, hopefully she won't get the show tile. Okay, she didn't get the show tile. In the very first FFR league that we did, in the very first race, I was ahead really, really far, and then the tile before the stairs, I ran into 4 worms that were unrunnable. And it cost me in first place.
Oh
So-
god, that's brutal.
It was really funny, and I wiped, so I had to go back. It was fun. That was great. Yes, but the randomizer has changed a lot since I've been here. I got in just before the 1.0 release, and we didn't have all the cool, quality of life fixes. We didn't have speed walking. We didn't have by 10. We didn't have a lot of things, and we didn't have like early startup. We didn't have all that. So routing for the beginning of the game, I mean, because we all had to kill Lich before we could move on, and that's when you saw routing divergence. But yeah, it has changed a lot, and I love it. It's been really great.
So we've got Danny on Chaos, and she's just powering up her knight fizz, and Chaos is just going to throw out some ink that's not going to do much of anything. More tempers going out, more power bonks going out, more white shirts going out, and oh my is gone.
Yeah, unfortunately that Ice 2 takes out the Black Mage, but continuing to beef up.
We're finally going to have a swing after I lost count of how many tempers. That's 4 hits for 666 damage.
Nice.
That's a solid amount of damage.
And she's playing what we would consider to be safety strats, where she would put her damage dealer in the back row and then put somebody else in the front row to kind of be a meat shield.
Absolutely. And that recent attack was 4 hits for 979. Chaos has got to be on his last few legs at this point.
Yeah,
Fade
Chaos
for 152. 4 hits for 694. Chaos goes down. That is time for Danny.
GG.
GG's.
GG's, Danny.
Well,
Sub
this-
2.
Sub 2. Woo!
Boy, that Tia too was something, wasn't she? Something successful. Whew.
Oh man,
Boy,
y'all
glad I had heal 3.
I did not get the nuke though. That was rough. I did get nuked on carry 2 though. That was pretty brutal.
I didn't see it on carry 2, but that I got the Inferno and I went, oh boy, and I was like, wait, I had to think real quick which red mage I had heal 3 because only one did, because when I bought it I only had enough money for one. And I was like, let me cast that real quick, and man, I'm glad it went off before the nuke did.
Oh gosh, yes.
Because with the Sun Sword, those fights take just a wee bit longer than the other ones. They
Yeah.
would have otherwise.
Danny, you almost caught up because of that commentator's curse that Sonny laid down there. You had a chance. I'm telling you now. I know it didn't look like that, but you had a chance towards the end.
You
I heard him
did have a
say it.
chance.
I heard him say it, and then they were like, something about commentator's curse. I was like, oh no, what did he do?
Hey, you know when I do a commentator's curse, it's never a good one. It's usually one that either ends absolutely drastically or has the person that I cursed left on their last leg.
Yeah, normally after I hit go mode, I completely stopped checking boxes, but I wasn't feeling real confident in that ice sword I had. So I'm glad I found that sun sword right at the beginning in Mirage, because I'd probably still be fighting fiends.
I did manage to find the Vorpal. I don't remember where, but I'm not on Team Vorpal, I'm sorry. I'm actually Team Fist. I normally would run a black belt and just punch my way through. But I'm glad I did have it, because I did end up finding the Sun Sword, so I put that on the red mage and stuff.
So as we're winding down here, would y'all like to talk about the tournament one more time and some of the deadlines associated with entry?
Leggy, I'll leave that one to you, since the
Yeah.
tournament's a little more on your forte.
So our spring tournament is going to feature flags fairly similar to this one. Most of the Swiss rounds are going to feature one of the 4 elemental dungeons having one of the key items, meaning that there will only be 2 loose items out there in the world. But for the most part, this is a fairly illustrative example of the sorts of things you will see our runners, or maybe even you if you decide to enter, dealing with in that tournament. Our signups are open until March 15th, at which point our first rounds of Swiss will start fairly soon after that. Exact dates to be determined depending on how much enrollment we have. And even if you're like, ooh, a month isn't ready enough for me to get ready and learn this randomizer, we would still love for you to come out, hang out, support everyone in the tournament, as well as, if you are interested in playing this non-competitively or want to start building your way up to playing competitively, come on down, check out our Discord. We're super friendly. We love having new people show up.
All right, that sounds good. And please do not forget to follow all of the lovely runners and commentators here tonight. Without communities such as the FF1 Randomizer community, this show would not be possible. So again, please follow Sho Fukumashi, Sonny Wrath 11, Leggy Starscream, and Danny3883. And again, that is all on Twitch. So thank you very much, folks, and thank you all for being here. This was fun. So remember, folks, Random Number Generation is brought to you by viewers like you. If you would like to support the stream as well as the other programs on GDQ Hotfix, please consider subbing to the channel. Remember, if you have Amazon Prime, you also have a Twitch Prime sub. Please consider using that for this if you have not already. A few quick announcements. The first step will be Thursday at 7 p.m. Co-op Halo Reach will be the subject for this week. Frame Fatale is starting this upcoming weekend, February 23rd through 29th. We're looking forward to seeing you all here for that. SGDQ Game Submissions opens up March 4th and closes on March 14th. On-site volunteer applications will be at the same time. For further information about Summer Games Done Quick, find out more on gamesdonequick.com. And that does it for this week. On behalf of GDQ Hotfix and Random Number Generation, I'm Skybilz. I have been so happy to be here as your host this evening. We're going to cut to a quick ad break, and then we're going to do a raid. And please stand by for that raid because it will support the Final Fantasy I randomizer community. Thank you so much, folks, and we'll see you back here. We're going to be doing Ori 1 randomizer to hype up Ori 2 in a few weeks. So that, again, will be Ori and the Blind Forest in a couple of weeks. We look forward to seeing you here 2 Tuesdays from now. Take care, folks, and we'll see you then.